in Laventa Park in Villahermosa. Many of the original pieces, the basalt heads, many of the amazing statues and artifacts that were originally at the great Olmec site of Laventa are now here. They were moved here in 1957, around that time, thanks to Carlos Pellicer, whose museum we also visited on this trip. It has many unique Olmec artifacts in it too. But here we have over 50 amazing Olmec statues, which thank God they were moved when they were, because the oil and gas companies were encroaching onto the Laventa site, which you can see when you're there, obviously, even today. And many of them got saved and brought here, and it's in a beautiful environment. It's in a nature park with animals, monkeys and crocodiles and panthers and other things, in a kind of jungle environment, much like Laventa itself. So we're going to look at some of the most important pieces and make sure we capture all of them on film, every single piece here, and photograph them and document them and explain some of them to you, so you can get a real taste of the incredible stonework that the great Olmec culture of ancient Mexico once carved. This just shows you a map of all the different statues here at Laventa Park. You can see there's quite a few here, combined with all the cartoon animals they've drawn on here as well. But it is really quite a remarkable place and well worth visiting if you're here in this part of Mexico. So here we have a coyote resting up in the shade in Laventa Park, one of many of the beautiful creatures here. So here we have Monument 11 from Laventa. The original of this is in the Carlos Pellicer Museum, but you can just see, it's interesting to note that it's got the classic kind of Quizzo position, the seated position we see here, and the kind of weird jaguar features and the cleft skull. It looks even like a serpent's on there as well. If you just come around here, you can see the kind of dip in the skull there, which suggests this was indeed a cranial deformed person. Here we have another famous statue from Laventa, which is actually, the original is now actually at one of the universities. And also, if you look carefully at the head, it's got a very high forehead and the flat back of the skull, which suggests this gentleman, who's also seated in the Quizzo position, did in fact have his head cranial deformed from birth. This powerful looking chap is actually a replica of the original that's in the Carlos Pellicer Museum, but you can see it's a very powerful position he's seated in. It's partly Quizzo position, more of a meditation posture, but you can actually see his jaw is very interesting, and his mouth, he's got some it looks like he's got fangs, or maybe he's representing a weird jaguar. This looks like one of the basalt columns, but this actually looks redder. It looks like red sandstone. And we know there are different types of rock that are used in various different parts of the Olmec world, but this is very interesting because this has magnetic properties and it is electrically conductive, which is very interesting because that fits in with the work of John Burke. So we do find that, you know, with sculptures like this and this red sandstone block behind me, that many of the areas of Laventa and all the other Olmec sites were magnetic. The stones were magnetic. We know they worked with lodestone compasses, but also they're electrically conductive. So any water that's channeled through various parts of the site would build up electric charge, and they use bentonite clay in many of the bentonite type rock, which is deflects water. It sort of pushes water away, so water travels much more faster through it. So that, combined with the electrically conductive rock, does create a kind of potential energy effect. So behind me here is Stele 19. This is the famous stele discovered at Laventa that has a very unusual carving on it, which people have debated about for many years. You can see this gentleman in the middle here. He's kind of holding some kind of bag. Some people call it a man bag. Officially, it's supposed to be resin or copal or incense or something like this, rather than actual anything strange. But others say it's some kind of device he's holding. It's like a handle or a lever. And the thing he's in isn't actually just a representation of a plumed serpent. it's actually some kind of flying machine or some machine for drilling or kind of mining or something else. It could be some special kind of technology. He also looks like he's got something on his face or his nose, like some breathing apparatus. So people like Eric von Daniken and other ancient astronaut theorists suggest it could be, you know, depict, you know, some kind of UFO or flying machine. However, if you look carefully at it, what I think it represents is one of the first representation of Quetzalcoatl, you know, the great god of Mexico, going back many thousands of years, who first arrived on this part of the Gulf Coast and actually left from a place many years later, apparently, from Quetzalcoatlus, which means serpent sanctuary or house of the serpents. And it's there where the river comes in, and it looks like a serpent's head with a sort of weaving serpent-like river going all the way down. And it's worth noting that many of the sites, like San Lorenzo and La Venta, were actually kind of on islands within this river. So they were on the body, like riding the body of the serpent, which is the Quetzalcoatl River, this could be partly representing that, and also revering where Quetzalcoatl first arrived, and also where he left at a place called Quetzalcoatlus. So to me, this is a very important and part of the whole Quetzalcoatl story, his link with the Olmec and how that spread into the Mayan and Aztec world as Kukulkan, Votan, and obviously the Aztec name, which is the one that's mostly used, of Quetzalcoatl. Just take a closer look at this. You can see it's almost like a rattlesnake's tail, and then the snake actually continues around here and goes up here. And on the head, this is where you have these plumes on top. You see these here and here. So this is why they think it could be the plumed serpent. If we look more closely, we have what looks like he's holding some kind of man bag, which Graham Hancock calls it. Officially it's a resin bag, which could be copal, and he's seated. You can see his legs there. Somehow he's kind of seated within the body of the serpent, touching the serpent, and his head has some kind of helmet and some kind of potentially breathing apparatus here, which has led to some confusion. And also you get these crosses here, which we find in a lot of Olmec iconography. So it's not known what this particular piece was used for, but what is interesting is that this cylinder with some kind of plug top on it is made of andesite. This is the same stone, exactly the same composition as what we find at Pumapunku and at Tiwanaku in Bolivia. There's not much of this andesite. Obviously you do get that with the volcanic activity around the Tuxtla Mountains. But I find it particularly interesting that we're finding the same stonework, the same kind of quality of carving, and even some of the same symbols here at La Venta as you do at Tiwanaku and Pumapunku. This is Monument 12, and you can see some kind of monkey creature with his arms going up behind his back. You can see his hands there. But this, if it's a monkey, why does he have such intricate mask on or makeup? Or is it some kind of shamanic symbol connecting humans with the monkeys? Headdress with the weird jaguar, the original we already saw at the Carlos Pelican Museum, also in Villahermosa. So here we have a replica of the scene that once took place here at La Venta. The elongated skull people made of jade buried under the sacred compound at La Venta site. So behind me here you can just see one of the pieces of the great drainage system all over La Venta, which stretched from all the mounds and the pyramids all around the site, thought to be just for drainage, but actually it was ceremonial, and they would collect in these very large basins, which you can see here. Now these were also used to collect charged up water, and this would enhance the seeds and grains when they were placed within the correct areas of the mounds and structures where this fast moving water would create electric charge. So this is very interesting, and it's interesting to see one of the basins that they actually collected in. So this would have been like purified, charged up water, which probably would have irrigated the crops as well to make sure they got a very good harvest every year. So behind me, this is Monument 2. This is one of the great Olmec heads. This is one of 4, or potentially 7, which we discussed already, found at La Venta. This is the most northern part of the site, and they were facing north. They were not facing into the site. But this is interesting because it's one of the smaller ones, and it shows a kind of happy face. And this was found in 1939 by Matthew Sterling. This is one of the stelae that was found at La Venta. The original is at the La Venta site museum, which we already looked at, but it shows one gentleman giving another gentleman some kind of staff, like a staff of power, passing on the power from one person to another. We have one very large piece of serpentine. Now, this is the type of rock that we know the Olmec were using, because some of their stelae and also the great mosaic floors were constructed from the same kind of mineral. And here we can see a beautiful green piece of it here. What's interesting is the name, serpentine, and obviously the great god Quetzalcoatl, and they have much serpent symbolism here throughout La Venta and other Olmec sites. This is an enormous rectangular chunk of basalt rock, crowned at the top. You can see the very top part there. Let's just zoom in a bit. Of a great open jaw of a fantastical feline crocodilian creature. It also presents a depiction of a woman carved in very high relief, which is unusual in the Olmec world. But she's dressed, she looks kind of like a dwarf, but she's dressed in a short skirt. You can actually see like the feet, she's sort of resting within. It's almost like she's inside a kind of sarcophagus with a great feline protecting her. It's almost like a great feline crocodile mouth she is actually sitting within. It's very strange. If we see the whole thing here, you can see what it looks like in total. It looks like about 8 feet tall, probably weighs in excess of several tons, maybe 5 or 6 tons. And if there's any carvings on the back, that would be interesting. We do have some kind of dimples here, sort of cut marks. Looks like it's just part of the movement of the stone or part of the destruction when they were decommissioned. But very interesting nonetheless. Difficult to see what this great piece of serpentine represents, but you can see the striations, you can see the shape at the top there. But this is a great piece of serpentine. It's either been very damaged or it's left unfinished, but still a mighty piece. Monument 66 here at La Venta Park. So this is altar 2, found at La Venta, and you can see it's one of the classic altars, or thrones now they think, with the emerging shaman coming out with the headdress. But in this one, it clearly shows, like we see in many of the other Olmec pieces, it's like a dwarf or a baby he's carrying here. So what that represents, we're not sure, but dwarfs do come up over and over again in the world of the Olmec, and they're carved frequently. So whether these were actual dwarfs the Olmecs were living with, we find examples all around the world. Homo florensis, obviously in Indonesia, we have legends and stories and eyewitness accounts in North America. So whether that's part of the same tradition, we just don't know. It's interesting that even later in the Mayan world, at a place called Uxmal, which means thrice great, it was said that dwarfs built the multiple pyramid site in one night. And so we find the same kind of iconography stretching from the Olmec right into the Mayan world hundreds of years later. So this is altar 3 from La Venta. Around this side we have a kneeling figure. We have a further standing figure here, seems to be leaning over and giving something to the seated shaman, who is also sitting in like a cross-legged position with both the legs going to his left, with his hand coming down and touching the earth here. So we have quite a high hat on this one as well, which is quite unusual for Olmec. Usually it's kind of like the helmets that we see. It's very interesting, very different. And this is altar 3 again similar to the others, but it's got its own unique take with these parts down the side here. So here we can see some kind of glyphs or symbols across the top. Here we have a figure who's on this side facing this way. You can see the face here with some kind of helmet, like a headpiece, even a beard it looks like here. We have another person here, see the face and the headdress, potentially a beard. They're both kind of reaching out and handing something to each other just here. He's kneeling down, this one's also sitting down. Very strange iconography, but what we do find here as well are these glyphs. These look like these were some glyphs here, here and here. Potentially more on the broken part. So this could be a great meeting of two different cultures. It could be a ceremonial initiation, it could be something else, but it's really hard to see this, but if you look closely you can sometimes catch it in the right light, what is going on and what is actually carved on these amazing altars or thrones here at La Venta. Here's the third figure here, and obviously the great high relief figure emerging from the altar itself. This is a very strange and interesting piece. It looks unfinished, but you can kind of see things in it. It's almost like it has simulacra, like a big face facing left. The top part could also be a head. Carlos Pellicer, who first discovered this monument, which is Monument 79, he said he called it the silhouette. I think it's a very interesting name because it's kind of like abstract, it's unfinished. It could represent someone with an elongated skull, or it could just be simply a natural piece of rock that never really got started. But worth noting here, nonetheless, it's a very interesting piece. You can kind of see the shape of a human though, with an elongated skull and an arm going down the side. So this dude is called Cleft Head, monument number 64. You can see why. Look at that, it's like he's got a huge cleft in the middle of his skull. Potentially, this could just represent what the helmet looked like, but it could also be a sign of the cranial deformation that took place here. We know it did in the Olmec world. It's got very thin, long eyes, and it's got something going on with its mouth, which could represent the weir jaguar. I'm not too sure, but worth noting here. It looks like it was part of a larger statue. Now this is a pretty strange one as well. This is Monument 63 called Individual with Banner. Now, it appears this individual down here is holding some kind of banner, they say, but if you look above it, you can see this great fish or whatever it is with huge jaws, dorsal fins and teeth that suggest it could even be a shark. The individual down here, as you can see in profile, is quite simply dressed. There's a girdle tied in a complicated knot. Very strange, and he's wearing clearly what appears to be a beard, whether that's a fake beard representing and revering the great god Quetzalcoatl, or whether it's one of the many travelers that were existing here in the Olmec world from different parts of the world. We'll never know, but it's here and you can see it clearly. It's very, very interesting piece here. It's almost like battling with this shark. It could represent something quite important. But what we see on the back here as well is what looks like lots of strange little cut marks. And it looks like there's more carvings. There's like a cross there as well. So, and you see all these cut marks here and these slices through the rock. Whether this is representation of some kind of number system or language, it seems to be mixed together, carvings and these strange indentations. It's a very unusual piece. It looks like it's been very badly weathered, but absolutely fascinating nonetheless. So this is Olmec head number 1. This was found in 1925. It's on the south part of the site at La Venta, behind the main pyramid. It's one of the only ones with a fully closed mouth, where some show teeth, others show more of the interior of the mouth. We have the classic kind of U-shaped appendage here, and it goes off into 3 petals at the top. We have the furrowed brow, the very wide features, and this really is an immense and wonderful Olmec colossal head, probably one of the most important ones of all. This must weigh at least 25 or 30 tons. It's very badly damaged on the back. You Can't really see anything now, unfortunately. It's obviously got a large earpiece here, and it's got the classic helmet or the leather hat, but this is just one amazing Olmec head. This seems so powerful. This really does seem like he was ruling the Olmec world from his place just below the pyramid at Levanter. So behind me here we have pavement 3. This is one of the great Olmec serpentine pavements that were deliberately buried in the northern part of Levanter, in the sacred precinct of Levanter. And this absolutely fascinates me. This is made of serpentine, but it was deliberately buried under clay and mud, and there were multiple layers of this serpentine. There was in fact 50 tons of worked serpentine in total found in the underground in the northern area of Levanter. Now what that was all about, we don't know. It could represent the serpent or Quetzalcoatl. It could be linked with the earth energies. They may have seen it as connected with that, because we know at that particular spot where this was found, the earth energies are very powerful. We also see just behind me there some of the basalt columns. Now these were also part of the sacred precinct of Levanter, and these kind of marked the sacred territory or the boundary, and only the elite would have been allowed into this northern part, whereas all the general populace would have been more in the southern part of the site. It's interesting because it is said to represent a kind of great mask, or even some kind of geometric jaguar face, or it could be a mixture of an Olmec and a jaguar, like a weird jaguar features. It could be something completely different. It could have geometrical significance. So here we have potentially, I think, one of the most important pieces of the Olmec world. This is the great altar. This was found at the far south part of Levanter. You can see 4 serpents coming in here. You can see the great shaman priest. You see more serpent symbolism potentially up here. This other one coming in here. And he's holding what looks like a rope at the bottom, but this could be something else. It could be serpentine, because we have this kind of queen figure with a serpentine arm. Sort of transforms from serpent to the queen. So it's absolutely fascinating piece. So when I came here in 2009, this was the piece. This was the great altar or throne that myself, my friend Ivan Orozco, we felt an energy force field coming out of this. It was incredible. And when I remembered at the actual site where now a replica is in place, is where 2 great energy lines cross, which could be what this represents. If we look carefully, I mean, I'm speculating here, but if we look carefully, like I said already, there's 4 serpents, one there, we have one there and one there, so that could be 2 energy lines coming into the center and crossing. And of course we have the shaman or the priest here holding what looks like a serpent across the bottom, which transforms from the arm of this particular queen, who's also touching the ground. So this is a very strange, very interesting abstract piece of art that was potentially the great throne of the Olmec kings, where above they once stood and collected the power of the earth into themselves and directed that power out into their great Olmec culture. Here we have on the right hand side a huge column, like a megalith of green schist, very unusual stone, and it's what, 12 to 15 feet tall. There's no carvings on it apart from what looks like some cuts, some scrapes, and something about 46 centimeters from the top end. If you look closely at it, you can see some of these features, but this is called number Monument 35. These are some of the incisions here, and it's just like a great monolith. It's just beautiful, simple, one of the simplest pieces of the Olmec, although we do have this on it. It looks like a modern bit of graffiti, although that does look like some kind of wing of some sort. So here we have a human head. This is Monument 78. It's got very deep cut eyes, but it seems like it was, according to what they say, that it was destroyed or mutilated before it was even finished. You look at the mouth, it's a very unusual, weird jaguar type mouth. Very powerful kind of jaw. The back of the head is very flattened here. Look, you can see like this perfectly straight. So whether that's a representation of cranial deformation, we just don't know because it is an unfinished piece. So here we just have a selection of pieces that were just found at Levanter, fairly random. We have some kind of big bowl there that was one of the probably collected water. As this one has got kind of the weird jaguar mouth feature on it. This is made of green, I think, serpentine. We have other pieces here. This looks very worn. It's difficult to make out exactly what that is, but it looks like some kind of face, potentially with a beard just there, and the face there. Sort of bulbous piece there, a flattened piece here. This looks like some kind of altar or tray that has a kind of serpent or a turtle coming out the front. There's these very badly weathered, just broken pieces found throughout. This looks like sandstone and limestone. This one here looks like some gentleman wearing a very interesting turban. You can just see the top of his head, that's like his nose there. There's something coming out of the back of that. Then we have these just random pieces here, sort of serpentine pieces. And here we can see a beautifully carved hand on what looks like a piece of andesite. And this one here, this is the final, this is like the random selection we find here, just on the centre of Levanter Park. So these really do interest me, these basalt columns. They sort of did mark the sacred precinct from the public precinct, the public areas, but they do have these strange cut marks on them, these kind of scrapings, which do seem to appear on many of them. Let's find further examples here. But this one's huge. This is, although it's probably a natural piece, it's not been shaped, they still had to move this. All the basalt that was used at Levanter Park was brought from the Tuxtla Mountains. There were some closer sources as well. But still, this one's 25 feet long. This is going to weigh a couple of tons. We find similar design specs, design style of these basalt columns at Namma Dol in Micronesia. We find them at Nimli Punit in Belize. Even the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, we have natural versions of these, but they are here. And so this is a design spec that has been noted worldwide. And the basalt itself has very, very powerful energetic properties. This is Monument 65, and it's said to represent an acrobat. I'm not sure why that is, because of his tiny arms and legs moving about on the side of it. It's on a semicircular stone it's been carved on. Yeah, and you can see its arms and legs all twisted around here, and it almost looks like a face on the back, but it's actually not. That's apparently his arms and his legs. So very strange, very interesting piece. This small piece does not actually come from Levanter. It comes from a place called Ixtlan in Veracruz, not too far from Levanter itself. But this is called Monument 60, and this is a very interesting piece. They call it like a boy jaguar, like a mixture, like a weird jaguar, but a small boy, combined with the jaguar features. And you can see all the carvings around the back here, the strange celt on the back. So that's a very interesting piece that we're finding similar pieces at different sites. So here we have Monument 56, which is said to be a monkey looking to the sky, but actually it would have really been on its side like this. Rather than looking upwards, it would have been looking forwards, just in whatever direction it was placed in within the mound or the pyramid. But it has the very similar features to what we found at the particular statue at Tres Zapotes. This is called Monument 20, or Cetacean. This is said to represent some kind of marine life, which was actually probably their main source of food, coming in from the Gulf Coast and the river, and it looks like some kind of large fish or shark made out of what looks like serpentine. So this is Monument 59, what they call a weir jaguar or human-like jaguar. Stretched out on its limbs. It supports a type of stone slab which is like it's got lots of these striations and carvings in, similar to what we find obviously in different parts of the megalithic world. And it holds some kind of spherical object at its head height, but this was a very powerful symbol to the Olmecs. They used it a lot, and look, you can see there's some kind of, it's holding something in his hand. So whether that's like a rubber ball of the Olmec ball game, or whether that's something else, it could be a stone sphere, could even represent the stone sphere we saw at San Lorenzo. It could even represent a continuation south in the stone spheres they potentially created in Central South America, around Costa Rica. It's also got what looks like a carved hole here. Whether that's deliberate, whether that's worn out, we don't know. It could represent a soul hole. More likely, it's part of their initial design. So this is Altar of the Owls, altar number 7, which is very unusual. It's got a human face with eyes closed, what looks like even a fake beard, and it's just got some owl feathers around it. This is why it's called the Altar of the Owls. It's a very, very interesting piece. You can see more carvings around this side of the stone, and then striations and cut marks as well. Very, very powerful looking piece. Again, it's emerging from the rock like we see with the other altars or thrones. This is a great piece. Look at this. It's supposedly called a feline altar with the mythical animal, potentially associated with fertility and the earth, with serpents around it as well, which they say is associated with the water, but it could mean something else. We've got some kind of wing going back here, so this could be another representation, however abstract, of plumed serpent or Quetzalcoatl. Difficult to see, the light's kind of strange on it at the moment. It's Monument 77 here. This is called the Governor, and this is the classic kind of Egyptian looking statues we see at the entrance to the sacred precinct at La Venta, sort of guarding between the pyramid and the main sacred area. Look at these beautiful carvings on the back. This is some kind of cloak, which is said to represent the jaguar, with the head and the headpiece, part of the great weird jaguar itself. Absolutely beautiful, amazing Egyptian looking headdress. You can clearly see on the side of this altar or throne what looks like elongated skulled babies, and even the adult here, or the baby on the back there, it's got the cleft skull, and above it there it looks like a serpent with glyphs. This is very strange, very interesting, just on the side of this particular altar. There's nothing really going on the back of this. Around the front we have the 3D image of the shaman emerging from the rock, holding the baby with the cleft skull. So this is called the Altar of the Children, Altar 5. And they said it could even have an astronomical function to do with the trajectory of the sun, so the shadows on this could have meaning. All the children on this is interesting why it was given that name, but it's like bringing like the baby from the underworld, from nothingness into reality. This could be like the representation of one of the gods doing that. So this is called the quadrangular altar. This is said to be one of the oldest of the Olmec altars, said to be a character emerging from the cave like we see on many of the other ones. The idea really is that the life emerges from, or is born in, a cave, and the cave is the representation between this world and the next. And the Olmecs may have been the first to come up with this concept that was used later by other cultures such as the Maya. This is believed to be the unfinished Olmec head, and you can see maybe the style that was used to try and create these, where they're kind of scraping away. It looks like they've softened the rock. This is Monument 68, and it does look incomplete, although it could be part of the process of destruction rather than creation by the looks of it. But it's difficult to tell. It's got the flat back of the skull, if it is an Olmec head. But yeah, this is very strange, very interesting, but you can kind of see the features emerging from the rock. This head, along with heads 2 and 3, was situated facing north and the east-west axis at the entrance to Complex A, which is the north part of the site. And this is where the pyramid is further south from there, and you can just see that the facial features here is given the name the Old Warrior. He looks like a very worn down warrior who's been battling for the Olmecs for many, many years. And you can see in the helmet here, it looks like some kind of claw up there as well, with which I think is possibly of a harpy eagle that covers the head. So this could be his totem, was the eagle, and you can't really see it too well, but you can see the claws at the very top there. These look like a great bird, like the eagle holding onto his head. So it's a very powerful totem, but potentially one of the great kings of the Olmec world. This is known as the Young Warrior. Again, this was between 2 and 4 in the northern part of the site, which we saw at the site looking north. The lips are slightly parted, it's showing the teeth, and this is a very distinctive form of basalt which came from the Tuxtla region of southern Veracruz. Again, we see the same kind of quality here, although this one seems to be much more badly weathered, although originally, no doubt, it would have had extremely beautifully carved stone detail, much like we see at many of the other heads. We see the flat back of the head. This could again represent elongated skulls or flattened skulls, and we see the striations again on the top of the head, something we keep seeing. I wonder what meaning that has, or whether it was just damage done later by another culture when these were being decommissioned. There's more examples of many of the basalt blocks, the columns that surrounded the sacred precinct of La Venta. Some of them seem to have some kind of carvings on them, but these are natural. This is how they were formed in the earth, in the Tuxtla Mountains. And this, I believe, is why this here was one of their graves buried deep under one of the mounds at La Venta, was where a great sarcophagus was held within, as though it was putting the Olmec rulers back in the earth. And you can see the monolith within there as well. It's very interesting. It's brilliant how they've reconstructed this here. This is like Monument 7. Within this burial were 2 young individuals, as well as magnificent offerings of polished obsidian discs, a hematite mirror with perforated jade figurines of a female that wears a hematite mirror on her chest, a foot carved from jadeite with 2 small hands, a chisel, and various other things, including a shark's tooth. So this was probably the burial place of a very important Olmec ruler. And this was actually found under the ground within one of the smaller mounds at La Venta. Absolutely amazing that this is very similar to what we find in North America, where we find structures, stone structures within the mounds themselves. So here we have Stele 3, which is called the Bearded Man. It's bas relief. There's 2 central figures here, but it's the one at the top which really fascinates me, because he looks like a flying figure, like floating above the others. So whether it's a representation of someone being on some kind of psychedelics or something, we just don't know. Whether they could simply levitate, who can tell? He looks like he's got some kind of breathing apparatus on there as well. But this guy here is nicknamed Uncle Sam because of his hook nose and his fake beard, although clearly it could be a real beard. But I find this absolutely fascinating. It's like a meeting of 2 dignitaries between the Olmec and this other culture who clearly look like they're European or from the Middle East or somewhere. And they're standing upon a kind of platform or sacred rock and sharing information. And there's like a god above What's two people above floating? Absolutely strange, absolutely fascinating piece of art. It looks like some kind of device. This looks like some kind of mining device or some kind of technology. Maybe that's what's making this guy fly. If you look carefully, you can actually see 6 figures that appear to be above the ground or floating, whilst the other 2 are having their meeting in the bottom part. So what is going on here? This is one of the most strange pieces in the whole of La Venta. This is Monument 5, also called the Grandmother. It seems to represent an older woman, but the headdress or the haircut looks like a Mohican. It kind of looks almost African. She's in a crouching position. She looks like a grandmother, but also looks a bit like a baby. Someone's even placed an offering within her hands there. Here we have a very large piece of serpentine that looks like it has not been worked, but is nicknamed the Throne or Monument 67. Here we have what's called the Traveller or Monument 13, and it clearly shows a turban wearing, curled sandal wearing traveller. It seems to represent someone who's moving. It's carrying some kind of flag, potentially an Olmec flag or a scythe, and it's got some early Olmec glyphs here, which could represent the meeting of a different culture or someone who arrived in the Olmec world. And this is their greeting, and this is their marking of where this happened. And this is at the entrance, very close to the sacred precinct in La Venta itself. So this is called the Stela of the King, or Stela 2 officially. And you can see these multiple people, almost like his bodyguards, protecting the great king here, who's holding his staff of power. There could be more going on here. This is a really quite amazing piece. It's the Stele of the King, and you can just see, let's get close up a little bit and just look at some of these images here, because these are the dudes going down the side here. See some kind of representation of spikes or thunder there. He's holding a staff. His face is being rubbed off, unfortunately. But down here you can see another gentleman, again holding some kind of weapon or staff. They're kind of flying around him almost. And he's wearing a kind of helmet with almost like some kind of breathing apparatus. So there could be some more to this than meets the eye. This one looks like he's got a beard, potentially a fake beard. Could be a real one, because we know this was a very cosmopolitan culture, the Olmec. These are quite worn, but you can kind of see more fake beards here. Amazing headdress here. It looks like a turtle on it. Very powerful looking features, and holding some kind of weapon or staff of power. So here you can see the 3 kind of what potentially bodyguards or protectors, but this one here has a beard, a fake beard or a real beard. We don't know. The king even looks like he could have some kind of fake beard or real beard here. So I find that really interesting. This is like the Uncle Sam, what was termed Uncle Sam statue as well, which we find the same kind of iconography. I think it's important to note these anomalies, because there shouldn't really be bearded people here in the Olmec world officially, but we keep finding examples. There could even be a beard here on this head. This is interesting because it's kind of the carving continues through through this course of the rock here, like as it goes down. It continues. It's very, very well done. Very beautiful piece of work, and this really is seriously monumental. So I really am just magnetized to the Olmec and what they represent and who they were. It's worth coming here. If you're going to come and look at the Mayan world in Mexico, make an effort and get down to some of these Olmec sites to see these spectacular pieces.